Rufus 4.15 is here, and it fixes one of the biggest problems from the last release, silent Windows installs freezing at 75%. Today I'm testing it on an unsupported Windows 11 PC with the hardware bypass and silent installation enabled to see if it finally works from start to finish. So first, what actually changed in Rufus 4.15? The headline improvement is better safeguards for the silent installation option. Rufus now does more to make sure you understand exactly what silent installation can do before it lets you enable it, and shortly you'll see why this matters. There's also improved cancelability during write retries. If Rufus runs into something like a bad sector or a read or write error and needs to retry an operation, you can now cancel out of that retry process instead of potentially being stuck waiting for it to finish. And then we have the big fix, silent Windows installations freezing at 75%. This was a known problem in Rufus 4.14. In many cases, Windows setup would run automatically, reach around the 75% mark, and then simply stop progressing. Rufus 4.15 specifically addresses that issue, so naturally, we're going to test it. There are several additional bug fixes in this release as well, but those are the changes most people are likely to notice. Now let's create the USB. Head over to the official Rufus website and scroll down to the download section. Look for Rufus 4.15. Depending on when you're watching this, it may still be listed separately as a beta rather than the main stable release. Download the standard executable. One of the nice things about Rufus is how tiny it is. The download is under 2 megabytes, and there's nothing to install because Rufus is completely portable. Just download it and double-click the executable. Next, connect a USB flash drive with at least 8 gigabytes of capacity. And remember, everything on this USB drive is going to be erased, so back up anything important before continuing. Open Rufus and start by checking the device section. Make sure the correct USB drive is selected. Double-check the drive size and drive letter because you really don't want to erase the wrong device. Under boot selection, click Select. Browse to your official Windows 11 ISO, preferably one downloaded directly from Microsoft, and open it. Rufus should automatically populate most of the remaining settings. For a modern UEFI computer, leave the partition scheme set to GPT. Now click Start. This brings up the Windows User Experience dialog, and this is where Rufus becomes especially useful. For this test, I'm enabling all the relevant options because I want to put the new silent installation behavior through a proper test. This is only a demonstration though. If you're creating your own Windows installation USB, choose the options that actually make sense for your computer and your setup. Once the options are configured, click OK. And this is where Rufus 4.15 introduces one of its most noticeable changes. If you've selected Silent Windows Installation, Rufus now shows a much more serious warning. The dialog explains that using silent installation can result in irreversible data loss. And instead of giving you one generic yes or no button, Rufus now requires you to acknowledge 3 individual warnings. The first is essentially this. You will make sure that every disk is disconnected except the disk where you actually want Windows installed. The second, you will make sure you do not leave this installation USB plugged into another computer that you do not intend to erase. And the third, you accept responsibility for any data loss caused by using the silent installation feature. That may sound dramatic, but think about what this mode is designed to do. A normal Windows installation stops and asks you questions. Which drive? Which partition? Are you sure? Silent installation is specifically designed to remove those interruptions. That convenience is exactly what makes it potentially dangerous. If the wrong disk is connected, Windows setup may not stop to ask you whether that's really the drive you wanted. And if you forget this USB in another PC and that computer later boots from it, well, congratulations, you've potentially created the world's most aggressive Windows installer. That's why I actually think this new warning system is a meaningful improvement. In Rufus 4.14, the warning was much easier to click through. Now you have to acknowledge each risk separately. Disconnect other drives, don't leave the USB in the wrong PC, and accept responsibility for what the automated process does. For this test machine, I have only one internal drive connected and no additional storage devices attached, so I can safely check all 3 boxes and continue. Rufus then displays the usual warning that the USB drive itself is about to be erased. Check one more time that you selected the correct USB drive, then click OK. Rufus begins writing the Windows 11 installation media. Behind the scenes, it also applies the Windows user experience customizations and generates the automated unattended configuration that Windows Setup will use during installation. Once everything is finished, the status bar returns to ready. Now for the part that actually matters. Does Rufus 4.15 get past the 75% problem? I'm taking this USB and plugging it into the same unsupported PC where I want to install Windows 11. Power on the computer, open the boot menu, and select the USB drive. Because silent installation is enabled, we're not going to get the normal Windows setup wizard. There's no clicking next. No choosing partitions, no manually entering regional information. Instead, the computer boots from the USB and Windows setup begins automatically. It detects the target disk, creates the necessary partitions, copies the Windows files, and follows the unattended configuration generated by Rufus. And this is the exact stage that made Rufus 4.14 so frustrating. On affected installations, progress would reach around 75% and then stop. So what happens with 4.15? We've passed 75% and it's still moving. That's exactly what we wanted to see. The installation continues normally, the computer restarts, and Windows moves into the out-of-box experience. Because we already configured the installation through Rufus, a lot of the usual Windows questions have already been answered. The local account is created automatically, regional settings are applied, privacy options are configured, and there's no Microsoft account prompt because that requirement was already handled through the Rufus customization options. The PC may restart a few times during this process, which is normal, and eventually we reach the Windows desktop. No manual setup interaction, no freeze at 75%, and no need to fight with Windows 11's hardware requirement screen on a PC Microsoft says is unsupported. This is a completely clean Windows 11 installation. There's no manufacturer added trialware, no random utilities I never asked for, and no pile of unnecessary programs launching in the background. It's just a clean Windows installation that I can configure the way I want. So what's the verdict on Rufus 4.15? The biggest fix is clearly the silent installation bug. If you avoided Rufus 4.14 because your unattended installs were freezing at 75%, this release is specifically aimed at resolving that problem. And on this machine, the installation completed successfully. But I'd argue the expanded safety warning is almost as important. Silent installation is incredibly convenient, but it also removes many of the confirmation screens that normally protect you from choosing the wrong disk. So before using it, disconnect every drive you don't want Windows touching, make sure you're working on the correct computer, and don't leave that automated installation USB plugged into another machine. One more thing you might notice after installing Windows updates and restarting the PC, Windows may suddenly ask you to change your password. Don't panic, this doesn't necessarily mean something is wrong. If your local account was created without a password, simply leave the current password field blank. From here, you can create a new password if you want one. Or, if you prefer to keep using the local account without a password, leave the new password fields blank as well and click the button to continue. Windows should then let you sign back in with the same local account without requiring a password. If this video helped you, hit the like button, subscribe for more practical Windows guides, and check out the other tutorials on the channel. You'll also find the useful links mentioned in this video in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.